I really love Japanese black pines. They are one of my favorite species for bonsai, and that's because they are super versatile. You can get them to flush a second time, which almost no other pine species can do. You can create small bonsai out of them in shohin size. You can create large bonsai out of them in chuhin size. They work as Neyagari style. They tend to develop great bark, they have an awesome green color. Basically, they are super fun to work with, super fun to propagate also. They give you a lot of options there. You can air layer them, you can create cuttings out of them, which most people don't know. Basically, they are just a super versatile species and extremely fun to work with. A few years back I saw this black pine at the Bonsai Trophy in the Netherlands and it made a really lasting impression on me. I thought it was one of the coolest trees in the whole show, so I decided to create my own black pine bonsai and start from seed. So I germinated around 100 seeds, and in this video I'm going to show you everything I've done so far in the first 3 years of development and walk you through my thought process and my philosophy behind everything. And with that said, welcome back to the channel. Hope you'll have some fun along the way. All beginnings are humble. My black pine started in this rather unremarkable black box almost 4 years ago by now. Now, like I said, I germinated around 100 seeds successfully, and after a year they looked like this. And that's the first time I started really to work on them. I separated them, and when I did this, I did a lot of root work, cut off all the tap roots and sorted out the rest of the roots, and after 2 years they looked like this. Now, because I had very many of them, I decided to take some risks on the root work and lost a few. I also gave away a few to my mom and to some friends, so now after almost 4 years I'm down to around 60. Something I found really interesting is how different they all are. Some of them are small, some of them are tall, and they naturally lend themselves to different kinds of styling. After the second growing season, I gave them their second root pruning, and again I went pretty hard but didn't lose any luckily, which also goes to show that they are pretty hardy trees. This is also the first time that I put some wire on them and I gave them their first bends and twists. Now, when you do this for the first time, you have to overemphasize every bend that you make, because as they grow stronger and as they grow larger, they will kind of grow out of these bends. So the first time you do it a little stronger than you intend the bend to be in the future. Also, try to get the first bend in as close to the root base as possible. One last thing to consider when you're putting wire on the tree for the first time and the tree is still young and still flexible is to put rotation in the trunk. And you can do this by putting in strong bends and then rotating in the direction that you put the wire on. You can see me doing it on screen right now. Doing this will lead to much more interesting trees in the future, because as the tree develops and matures, the bark won't go up and down the tree in straight lines, but rather it will twist around the trunk, which in general is a much more interesting look. One thing to mention about my trees is that I've created some of them as seedling cuttings. That means after germinating them, when they are still very young, you take them out of the soil, cut them just as if you were doing a regular cutting, and stick them back into the soil. That then forces them to create a new root system, and after they do this, they tend to create buds much lower down the trunk. Typically, Japanese black pines that are created from cuttings lend themselves much easier and much better to creating shohin-sized trees. So that's something to keep in mind. Something also to keep in mind about this is that it doesn't come without its risks, so you should only do it if you have enough trees. This is how the trees looked like after the second year and after I had put wire on them for the first time. So this is me after the third year repotting a few of these trees, and my objective is to show you what I'm doing, how I'm working with the trees. I will give them another root prune. I will wire them in new pots. I will also up pot them for the first time, because I felt that after 3 years in these very small pots that I mainly used to work on the root system, I now wanted to create more growth and therefore up-pot them. Now remember, I had to do this 60 times. And so for this video, I picked 3 trees that I found interesting because they were very different in size. One very small one mid-sized one, and one large one, because this really illustrates the differences in development that they have. So now I'd like to show you the way I repot these trees and what I do to the root systems, what I do to the trunks, how I fit them in the containers, and I'll try to walk you through this whole process as good as I can. The first thing that I do is I fit a wire, and this is a 2.5mm aluminum wire, into the pots, and you can see I've prepared the pots already with some mesh in the bottom, and I put some bends in the wire and fixate it in the pot like this. I bend around the wire on one side, and the other end of the wire I put in the other side, and now it's fixated. And later on I will fix the trees with these wires, and I will also use these wires to bend the trees. This method works really nice, and I do it like this in the future again, but there's one drawback to this method that I should tell you, and that drawback is that once the trees start growing, the wire will start to bite into the bark, which is normal and it's to be expected, but then you have to unwire the trees. But now the trees are no longer fixed into the pots because you use the same wire to fix the tree in the pot as you use to bend the trees. So you have to wire the trees again with the same wire, which I found works fine, but it creates one more step of work that you could spare if you would use 2 wires, one to fix the tree into the pot and another wire to bend the trees. However, there's also one upside of this method, and that upside is that you can get the first bend very low on the trunk, which would otherwise be more difficult if you would stick the wire from above into the soil and then try to put a bend in. So taking everything into account, I think this method is a pretty good method, and I'd use it again in the future because it saves on wire and it makes bending the trees really convenient. The substrate that I'm using for these trees is made up out of pumice, lava rock, akadama and kiryu. I've experimented also with different mixtures. In some I put in some pine bark, and in some I put in some perlite, and everything seems to work about equally well. So as long as it's free draining, you'll be fine with any type of bonsai substrate. Now you can see me trying to get the tree out of its pot, but what I forgot was that it was still fixed in with wire from the last year, and that wire was almost invisible, but I eventually found it, and then I could get the tree out of the pot. So now that it's out of the pot, I have a look at the tree and evaluate it. This one is fairly large. I have some that are even larger than this, but it's a fairly large one. It has a lot of mycorrhiza, which is pretty good, but it also has a lot of bite marks on the trunk because the wire that I used last year was too thin, which is not that big of a deal because eventually the bite marks will disappear anyway. And some people actually argue that having bite marks in a young age in black pines helps to thicken up the trunks, but I hadn't intended it that way, but if it works, I'll be fine with it. I'm squeezing the roots here to loosen them up, and then I use a chopstick to loosen them up even further and eventually untangle them. And all it takes is some elbow grease and a lot of patience, especially if you have to do 60 of them. Now this might look brutal, but it actually isn't. The trees don't really care about it that much, and you should always use the opportunity, especially with young material, to create nice root systems. And creating nice root systems only works by repotting them every year and working on a radial root system, cutting off everything that you don't need, keeping everything that you do need. And that's just the way to do it, and use the opportunity with young trees to work on this thoroughly for the first 3 to 5 years. Finally, the root ball slowly gets untangled and loosened up, which is just what we want. And for sure, we'll find some roots that we need to cut off. Some might be too high, some too low, or some might cross each other. And the job is to cut them off. But first things first, we need to repurpose the soil that the tree has been growing in, because in this soil there's a lot of mycorrhiza, which is an organism that the tree lives in a symbiotic relationship with, and it helps the tree pick up nutrients. So in general, it keeps the tree much happier if it can keep as much of the mycorrhiza that it's been growing in the past as possible. So therefore, try to always repurpose at least some of the soil. Before replanting the tree, I will now assess the roots carefully and cut off some of them. I will also pluck off some of the needles that will get in the way when I wire the tree into the new pot. And I'm just gonna leave you watching this for a few moments. Now, this type of root work is much more civilized than what I did the years before. And the longer you go on with these trees, the more civilized it will get. Meaning, you will not have to cut off as much as you will have to do in the first years. As I said, in the first years, I was very, very, very brutal with these trees. And I cut off everything that I really didn't like and really didn't need it for the future. And that's a risk, but it's a risk worth taking. Now, wiring these trees in place is also kind of interesting, because as you might have realized by the wire bites from the year before, I'm wiring the tree in the opposite direction than I did last year. And that way I can create new turns and new twists in the tree in the opposite direction that they are already in the tree. And that will make for a much more interesting trunk line in the future. You have to be careful though, not to untwist the trees by accident, because now you're putting bends in the opposite direction that you have already put bends in. And by accident you might straighten the trunk line out, and that's something you will have to try to avoid here. Still, you will get way more interesting trees by giving them bends in both directions. And since you cannot really bend the trees in the opposite direction that you have put the wire on, you will have to split this up in 2 years. This looks pretty good, I think. And now comes the really cool part of my method. Now I use the old container that the tree had been growing in for the last 2 years, and I cut this container up and I will put it over the tree. By doing this, I can add some more substrate into this container, therefore plant the tree higher in its new container. The new roots can grow into the new container. This way I can get a nice root system that spreads out into the new container while also saving a lot of space. Otherwise I would have to use bigger containers for the trees, and since I have 60 of them, saving any kind of space is really welcome. In the coming year I can remove this container, and the roots that have been growing inside of it will make up part of the nebari of the tree for the future. All that's left to do now is fill up the pot with some new substrate, and this tree is ready to go for another growing season. Now that the first one is done, we only have to do it 59 more times. No, but I'm going to spare you this. What I will do, however, is show you the other 2 trees that I did on that morning. But I'm gonna speed up the footage so that you don't have to spend 5 hours watching me replant young Japanese black pine seedlings. The process is going to be the same for both of these trees. First of all, get them out of the pot, then sorting out the roots, put them in the new pot, secure the wire, give them some new bends. That's basically it. Something quite interesting that I found is that the amount of mycorrhiza the trees have tends to correlate with the tree's sizes. So in other words, the really big tree that I did in the beginning has the most mycorrhiza. The mid-sized one doesn't have as much, but the small one has very little. This is something I found really fascinating, and I'm wondering why that happens. Anyway, I'm going to leave you alone for a moment while I'm showing you the time lapse of the other 2 trees, and I'll see you at the end of this process. So I hope that the process is getting clear by now. There's probably a million different ways of doing this. I mean, growing black pines from seed. This is the way I'm doing it. I'm really happy with this method. I've been checking out as many videos on this subject matter as I could. I hope this video will add to the other videos that are out there and people will find this helpful in some way. I can tell you this much. The trees have been growing exceptionally well this year. All these videos were shot around February and now it's August and the trees have been doing really, really well. So here are all the 3 black pines that I did on that morning. Like I said, I have 60 of them, so I had to do quite a few more. And I'm going to show you each one of these 60 in the upcoming montage. And I want to elaborate on that montage a bit because it was really fun to shoot actually. I put the camera on a camera slider that was moving left to right, and each time the slider was on the left side, I switched out the tree on the right side, and when the slider was on the right side, I switched out the tree on the left side. And I think the outcome of this is actually pretty cool. I like it. It was an absolutely unreasonable amount of work for one camera shot, but I hope people will appreciate it. And if you don't, you might skip to the end of the video where I'm going to show you another pretty cool clip in which I put all the trees on the new shelf that I built especially for the trees. Yeah, that's my journey with my black pines for the last 3-4 years. I hope you got something out of this. As you can probably tell, this video took a lot of work and a lot of time. I mean, I've been shooting videos for this for almost 4 years now. So I'd appreciate it if you would leave a comment and if you would click the like button. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, then please do so. It really helps us out. And I'll see you in the next video. And hopefully it won't take that much time for the next video to be released. Until then, enjoy the footage of the black pines moving from left to right, and maybe put the time code in the comments of the one that you like best. Alright, I'll see you later. Bye bye.